Hello, and thank you so much for tuning in to our live stream of Be Composed Live and Entomological Fantasy. I'm here at Old Jet Studios in Suffolk, and we're here for the Ars Electronica 2021, a new digital deal exhibition with our UK garden. And right before introducing myself and my collaborator Karun, I just want to note that if you've got any questions, just pop them in the chat function and we will answer them at the end. So welcome to Be Composed and Entomological Fantasy. So my name is Lily Hunter-Green, and I'm an installation artist and a contemporary composer, and I'm here today with my computer scientist and collaborator Karun Matharu, who I'll introduce in a short while. And we're going to be basically introducing you and talking you through a series of art installations, my work Be Composed Live and Entomological Fantasy, and Silencing the Virus, which Karun will be here with me for. So firstly, Be Composed. So Be Composed was an installation I designed in 2014, where I converted a series of redundant pianos into working beehives, and I composed using the sounds the bees were making whilst living inside the body of a piano. For this work, we connected contact microphones all up the back and the sides of the piano, embedded a webcam inside the piano so that you could watch and listen to all the intricate sounds of the bees living inside the body of the piano. I have a short video clip of Be Composed, which I'll play for you just now. Yeah, so Be Composed was designed to raise awareness of the declining population of the bees. It was, as I said, this installation I developed right in the beginning. So next slide. Bees are dying due to multiple and interacting causes, things like climate change, parasites and viruses, pesticide use, modern farming practices, habitat loss. All these different reasons are interacting and causing a huge decline in numbers. So I've been working with scientists and computer scientists to develop these various different digital art projects that each address these issues. So for Be Composed, I had to become a beekeeper. And basically for this, I started developing these, as I said, these installations. But I'm really inspired by the ways that the honeybees work as a collective in the hive. They all have their own job roles within the hive, and they know what they have to do to make the colony a success. So my ongoing large-scale project Be Composed Live looks to the natural world for guidance and instruction, looks to the ways that these honeybees work as this community. As I said, I started building this project. Next slide. So Be Composed Live is my umbrella project, and basically it's two things. One is that it's, as I said, it's a metaphor for the ways that the honeybees work as this community, and two, it's the creation of a unique microcosmic space which invites audiences into understanding the science of the working beehive, and also, through immersive experiences, kind of digital experiments, digital art installations. And so For this, as I said, we've been looking at the different job roles that honeybees have in the hive. So honeybees all have these different job roles. You've got bouncer bees buzzing around the front of the hive, rejecting any unwanted visitors. You have undertaker bees flying the dead bees out of the hive. You have nurse bees raising the babies and feeding the queen. You have architect bees and builder bees building and measuring the frames. So all these different job roles, all these bees are doing these different job roles. It's a real interdisciplinary hive, a real collaboration. And so, as I said, inspired by that, I've been creating Bee Composed Live. And Bee Composed Live, as I said, is looking to this collective as an inspiration, but I've been building my own collective network of unlikely collaborators. So I've been working with two molecular scientists based at the University of Cambridge. I've been working with computer scientist Karun, who I'll introduce again in a bit. I've been working with the dancers and choreographers, opera singers and engineers, and all of these different collaborators kind of come onto Bee Composed Live, the big project, and add something different. And as I said, we're working towards this collective wisdom. So these are images of Bee Composed Live, and as I said, throughout the installation, we look at different scientific facts about bees. One specific one that I'm going to show you a video of in a second is working with dancers. Now, in a healthy colony in the middle of summer, you have about 30 to 40,000 honeybees working away, as I said, doing all these different jobs. They need to have a really effective and efficient communication system. So one really impressive and beautiful ways that the honeybees communicate in the hive is through dance, interpretive dance. So I was working with the choreographer and the dance team, Neon Dance and Adrian Hart, looking at the different ways that bees communicate. And what they're trying to communicate is obviously where the nearest and best source of food is. They're going to be talking about where they're going to swarm or move nest or move hive. So as I said, they're dancing, and the three dances are called the round dance, the tremble dance, and the waggle dance. So we have a very short clip of Neon Dance in action for you here. Yeah, so next slide actually. Oops, sorry. Great. So yeah, so another fact about bees that I was exploring with performers actually was working with two opera singers. Now, when two queen bees are born in the hive at the same time, they instinctively know to kill each other. They basically emerge from their cells, move over to each other, sting each other over and over and over, and one dies and one is crowned queen. So you can sort of see from this image, the other worker bees all surround them and they kind of egg them on, but it's almost like a kind of, a Greek tragedy or a really performative piece. And so what's really interesting about this is right before they do this kind of, right before they move over and kill each other, they actually call out in a sequence of notes, musical notes. So the first queen will, as she's emerging, produce a G followed by 5 G sharps, and then there will be a response from the other queen bee, and she'll it's called quacking, and she'll produce a series of notes, and they sing a call and response before they move over. It's like a precursor to the death of the queen bee, and so we have a very short snippet of sound which actually features in Silencing the Virus. So you can hear the build up, and also the first thing you'll listen to in this sequence is the queen bee, and then the opera singers imitating that sound. Great. So that moves me on to, again, another element of Bee Composed Live. This specifically looking at climate change and how it's affecting bees. Climate change is actually affecting bees in a number of ways, but this specific piece is basically looking at something called seasons creep. It's as the planet heats up, the seasons are shifting. So as the bees head out to forage for food, they're missing the flowers in bloom. So there's been a disruption in the synchronization between the pollinator and the pollinated. So this is really quite, well, obviously it's really distressing, but basically in different bits of the world, they're now having to hand pollinate their crops because they don't have enough bees to do the job in certain regions. In places in southwest China, for example, they're using hand pollinating techniques. They are climbing to the top of the flowering fruit trees and painting pollen from flower to flower using a paintbrush. When I was doing a residency at Birkbeck in London, I came across something quite amazing and wonderful, actually. But they're using things like piano tuning forks to pollinate crops. Piano tuning forks are the only thing that will resonate in the same frequency as a certain species of bumblebee. So it's actually a musical communication technique. So bumblebees and humans now actually will resonate in that musical frequency, and the pollen will spit out, meaning that bumblebee then can transfer it to a separate flower. This is obviously really, as I said, as poetic and beautiful as it is, it's actually really sad and distressing, because if that species of bumblebee becomes extinct, as many are, that flower will follow very soon after. And it really shows the interconnectedness and the fragility of our ecosystem and how closely one thing relies on the other. So what we have now is a video of tuning in, so you can actually see the pollen spit out. It's from the projections that you can see actually kind of behind this image on the screen. there's a sound sculpture in the center, and there are tuning forks on the sound sculpture, and contact microphones all in the bouquet of flowers. And as audiences interact with the installation, the digital installation, the pollen will actually shoot out, but it gives people that closeness to nature. So here's the video of the projections of. Great. So now we're going to, oh, sorry, there's another image of tuning in there. Now we're going to introduce you to silencing the virus. Just before I'll do the, oh, it's just, so silencing the virus is the science and art project that I'm going to be, that I've worked on with Karun, who I'll introduce you to in just a second, which we have the other collaborators in the project on this screen now. This was a result of a residency, a Sci Art residency that I did at the University of Cambridge. If you just go to the next slide. A residency that I did at the University of Cambridge in 2018, where I was invited by the Gurdon Institute to work with two molecular scientists. One is Dr. Luigi Aloia, and him and myself worked on a project looking into human health in a world without bees. And the other is Dr. Eyal Maori, who is this scientist here, and he worked with us on silencing the virus. His job is to look at how honeybees and viruses. He basically develops antidotes and vaccines, essentially, for bees that have viruses. And in this specific instance, it's called the Israeli acute paralysis virus. Eyal's research is really, really interesting. And before I talk you through the digital aspects, I'll just run you through the science. He basically developed this amazing antidote, right? And he knew it was going to work. He was really confident that he had developed something successful. So he went down to the bees, applied the antidote to the honeybees, and then expected in 5-6 months' time he was going to have to reapply this antidote because it would be the next generation. So he went back down, and he discovered 6 months later that something remarkable had happened, in that the honeybees had taken it upon themselves, taken this particle of RNA and embedded it in the royal jelly for the next generation. He only had to give one batch of bees this vaccine. So the honeybees had taken it upon themselves to actually do something good for the next generation, which meant that he only had to apply it once. And obviously that's an incredibly inspiring story in itself, in the sense that the honeybees are already looking out for the next generation, but they also have a technique called social immunity, and that's like working as a collective to silence viruses, which led me to this sort of inspiration for this next piece. In fact, actually, I'm going to introduce Karun here, because this is a great opportunity to bring him in. So this is Karun Matharu, my computer scientist in this project. I'll get him to...
Hi guys, I'm Karun Matharu. I've worked as a software developer or computer scientist within the field of finance and writing algorithms for the financial industry. And so I joined Lily as a collaborator for some of the technical aspects of this project.
Yeah, so basically, I brought Karun in true honour of the hive mind, because when I was doing this residency with Eyal, after spending many hours and evenings in the laboratory with him, I wondered whether it would be possible to infect my musical compositions with an actual virus that kills bees. You know, could we change the genome sequence of a molecular virus into a hexadecimal computer code and run it through my compositions that I'd been writing with the bees? And so, as I said, invited Karun on board, and he luckily responded in theory yes to the concept. And he is going to explain how we infected musical compositions with an abstract virus.
So knowing that Lily was a composer, she was going through the process of composing various pieces, and we tried to bring this together with the notion of this sort of virus spreading, the Israeli acute paralysis virus, by virtually sort of infecting the music that she was composing. Now, how this takes place is that we have a genome sequence, which is essentially a string or a sequence of bytes, which we can use, and we can place this within the music using an algorithm which swaps or replaces or sort of interrogates the bytes within that music, and essentially changes the physical properties of that piece of music. It's quite invasive. The algorithms work in various ways, and the end result is the music glitches, there are hiccups within it, there are changes in how it sounds and pitch changes by this infection. Additionally, the way we wrote the algorithms is that the rate of infection can change and the level of infection can change. So the music you listen to can start off being slightly infected, where it's sort of slightly glitchy, and this can progress to be much more invasive, where the virus really takes hold of the music. And we'll show you this when we play some of this later.
Yeah, great. I guess so what I really loved about that, again, was the collision between sort of science or biology and music, and it really brought those two things together. We created, as I said, this incredible sound piece, and it was really exciting to push that. But I also, we both kind of decided that maybe it wasn't necessarily communicating the research effectively on its own. So we started to embed these LED lights in frames of honeycomb, so you can visualize how the virus takes over the hive, essentially. So it started with one green LED light to indicate the infection, moving to, and again, eventually going orange, and then eventually red, which indicated fatality. And this gave audiences the opportunity to understand the rate of transmission, how quickly the Israeli acute paralysis virus runs through the hive by visualizing it, and also accompanied by this sound piece. Again, I'll let Karun demonstrate the virus.
So what we started looking at is how viruses spread in both 2D and 3D environments. Essentially, if we take a structure which is composed of cells, and one of those cells is infected, it will then infect neighboring cells, and those neighboring cells infect their neighboring cells, and the virus slowly can spread from one place to cover the whole structure. This is similar to the structure of a honeycomb, in that one sort of slot or cell within the honeycomb can be treated as one cell or one node within this piece. And if one of those cells is infected, a virus can spread to neighboring cells and spread across the honeycomb. We wrote these, we prototyped these sort of viruses visually, and then what we did is we ported the code over so that it can be run on LED matrices. So we've got an example of one here, which we'll show you. Similar to some of the images. So we have an LED board up here, and although it may not be clear within the camera, the bright part is where the virus is sort of spreading. It initiated in one corner, and the virus will spread across to other parts of the matrix board. It's a lot clearer in the images that we've posted on this slide, yes, in that the colors change from a sort of light green to a red when the infection is severe, and this slowly comes across. If in the sort of image within the center at the top, you can see when the honeycomb is superimposed on this matrix, that we can see the light as the virus spreads through the honeycomb, and it creates quite a sort of attractive visual effect. And this was one of the pieces that we worked on for this.
Oh.
Yeah, turn it upside down for the light.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good idea. Great. Oh yeah, there's just another visualization of silencing the virus, the LED matrix boards. Let's go to the next one. Yeah, so following on from that, again, being quite ambitious, and we basically wanted to upscale even further, although, as I said, that was a really quite successful in terms of communicating how the virus spread through the hive. We then upscaled to turn the art installation into something immersive, and this was to note before coronavirus. But I wanted to kind of understand and play around with the idea of contact. So the idea of passing a virus through participants inside an immersive space, essentially having the audience embody the bees and infect each other with this audio virus. So the idea was to have, I was actually inspired by the silent disco to start with, the idea that viruses are all like large, sort of asymptomatic. You don't necessarily know who in the space has the virus, and so by it being a silent disco, you don't know what they're listening to. So this kind of idea was to have one audience member as a viral host, and if they move closer to other participants in the space, they will spread the audio virus around the room. Again, going to Karun and talking to him about what could be possible here, we then kind of brainstormed with the idea of proximity sensors, how close do the participants have to be, or the bees or the people have to be in the space in order to pass the virus from person to person. And again, so Karun came up with sort of wearable technology which enabled us to make that happen.
So, as Lily said, given that we were trying to use proximity to understand and simulate how a virus spreads, we made use of mobile phones, which are quite readily available and have a number of sensors, one of those being GPS. With those sensors, within some kind of margin of error, we can approximate where somebody is. And if we have data from a number of different people within a space or within a room, or within some kind of locality, and we know where everyone is, we can kind of understand how they move around in this space and how they interact with one another. We can also sort of understand the duration with which those interactions occur. Using this data, this can be fed back into a simulation of how viruses spread amongst people. So what we did is we developed an application which we called Silencing the Virus, and it's running on this mobile device right now. And each participant within our soundscape installation will be given one of these and allowed to explore a space. These devices would feed back their location to a server, and as the server has information from all of those people, it can then simulate an infection spreading. So in essence, if you're somebody who stays away from others, keeps yourself to yourself, and always ensures that there's distance between you and one another, you will very rarely, or it will be unlikely that you'd get this virus. On the other hand, if you interact with lots of others, if you spend time amongst other people within the space and one of those happens to be infected, it's likely that you get the virus. Once the virus takes hold of this, within this sort of micro community, it can spread very quickly. Now, the way that participants know that they're infected is that they are listening to a piece of music composed by Lily, and that piece of music can dynamically be infected by the algorithms we discussed earlier. So somebody who isn't infected would hear an uninfected piece of music. It wouldn't be glitchy, it wouldn't be changed in any way or altered, whereas someone who is heavily infected and has been infected for a while will hear a severely infected piece of music. We will show you this in a video.
Yeah, you can hear it as well.
Yes, and also as part of the video we'll play an infected piece of music so you can hear how this takes place.
Yeah, so that's an example of kind of some of the participants in the space of silencing the virus, moving around. And as Karun said, if you keep yourself to yourself, you essentially will not contract the virus. If you just move to the next slide. Yeah, so as you can see, and you would have seen in the video, we dressed the participants in hazmat suits. And this was, again, being pre-pandemic, pre-pandemic era was quite surreal the following year when there were hazmat suits all over the place. We also actually exhibited in a redundant shop in Chelmsford Shopping Mall in Essex, where we again the idea was to kind of give this dystopia, or this idea of the world being taken over by a virus. So we had this. The following year, the shopping malls closed, hazmat suits are everywhere, social immunity and social distancing is now a kind of very commonly used phrase that we were kind of exploring the previous year with silencing the virus. And these are just sort of, again, images and stills that you might have seen already online, but of silencing the virus. So yeah, just to sort of note that the kind of idea behind all of this and what we're moving towards now, actually I'll show the next one as well. What we've been developing recently is looking at this idea of social immunity within the hive, and looking at the techniques that the honeybees employ in order to prevent the spread of viruses in the hive, whether it's leaving something to the next generation, or socially distancing in the hive themselves. And again, since COVID-19, that has been quite a common thing to explore, how other species might deal with pandemics. And in this instance, as we've stated earlier, but honeybees really do have these amazing mechanisms, and one of them is social distancing, the other is sanitizing strategies amongst it within the hive. They will go and collect resins and things that are sort of essentially hand sanitizers for us, as defense mechanisms for these viruses. So we worked, and inspired by the matriarchal honeybee hive, myself and Karun, worked with these young female coders aged 9 to 19 called the S60 Mets, who programmed drones, flying drones, to imitate the social behavioral patterns of honeybees in the hive when they're faced with environmental challenges. And the next one. Yeah, and so again, so what we will leave you with on this is that, what can we learn from the social behavioral patterns of honeybees, and how can that knowledge translate to human future societies? And how can we, as human beings, use new technologies to translate the knowledge of another species, and how can that, hopefully help human futures societies. But we're going to now just play you, because it's such a beautiful video that's been edited and filmed by Zoe Coldham, who's a filmmaker, that really shows and I think captures silencing the virus in its true form. So
IPV is an infection agent. It's an aggressive virus. The disease starts with shivering. It affects the nerve systems. It affects the color, and it progresses quite fast. After a few days from the infection, the individual bee collapses and dies. And IAPV can very efficiently lead to a devastating mortality in a whole colony and in a whole apiary levels.
I wondered whether it would be possible to infect all of my musical compositions with an actual virus that is killing the bees. I basically went to Karun Matharu, who is my computer scientist in this project, and asked him, is it possible to turn the genome sequence of a molecular virus into a hexadecimal computer code and infect loads of musical compositions with it?
Our experimentation involved a period where Lily would compose pieces of music, send them to me, and then I would write an algorithm to sort of pseudo-infect this piece.
is totally inspiring the ways that the bees work as a collective. The honeybees are already looking out for the next generation, and I think it's an essential message. This is why I've brought people together, because I know that I can't do it on my own. The subject is too big, but I'm really lucky to have it as my research focus, because it's inspiring. It's the story of togetherness and community. It is also a story of existence, and it is so relevant. And once people realize that and they connect with that again, it becomes a whole another avenue that my sort of hive mind map goes off in 12 different directions.
Yeah, so now we're going to basically open up for any questions that anyone would like to ask. I think there should be hopefully some in the chat function, or I'll have a little look.
Yeah, so one of the questions on one of the discussion boards was to do with the technology used. In terms of prototyping, we tried to start with something as simple as possible, and on a number of projects, I think Lily and I have found that the processing programming language has worked quite well. It's allowed us to prototype things very quickly before we move to hardware. Again, a lot of these algorithms, the algorithm which infected the music, the algorithm which spreads through the kind of LED matrix, all of these were prototyped in pure code and even done visually before we had to sort of buy or invest in hardware. And so processing has allowed us to do that. And this is the same, we developed the algorithms and then we were able to sort of port them over to Java to use in Android apps, and they can also be used elsewhere.
Great, cool. Have we got any more questions for people? I mean, some really nice comments. Thank you, everybody. And also, we will, I think it's being recorded on YouTube, so we should be able to post it somewhere, everywhere. But yeah, that's definitely going to be there. Any more questions? Where's the YouTube? Is that on here?
Yes, that's okay.
I haven't got any more, I don't think, unless they're streaming late.
Yes.
But yeah, so basically, thank you all for tuning in to our talk today. And again, don't hesitate to get in touch either through www.lilyhuntergreen.com, or even Karun. What's your website?
My website is www.karunmatharu.com. And again, if any questions come up in the discussion...
Oh, hang on. We have
yes.
a question. Aside from social distancing, is there anything else that bees do for human society? Oh, that's a good question. Is there anything else that bees do? I mean, again, I think the general empathy and altruism that honeybees seem to have for each other, not obviously just because of socially distancing and things inside the hive, but their general sort of looking out for each other in the next generation and things. There's definitely that. I'm just trying to check that I'm reading this. Social distancing. If we're talking about this in terms of the pandemic, then again, yeah, there are other things that the honeybees do in terms of, well, number one, as I said, altruism, but the bee will fly itself out of the hive if it has the virus and it knows it has it. It will remove itself. As I said, the undertaker bees will fly the dead bees out of the hive really efficiently and effectively if they're sick. So that's another thing that they do. And in general, all work together harmoniously and collectively and all put each other first, which I think is a pretty nice message to end on, probably. But yeah, thank you so much for tuning in, and thank you, Ars Electronica, for having us. We're going to leave it now.
Thank you.